Welcome to a special edition of The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. My name is Bernard Avlet. We are live on Channel 1 Television. Tonight we're going to look at Ghana's import-export conundrum. Every country wants to export because that's where you get your foreign currency. Countries import because they can produce everything. You need a fine balance between the two. The Ghana Statistical Service has been generous. They've been producing the highlights of their trade reports for a few years now. They released the latest for the first quarter of 2024. I'm going to look at some very key issues. So, what are some of the highlights of that particular report? What are Ghana's top 10 imports? What are our top 10 exports? Which are our most important trade partners? This will be what I'll do in the first part. I'll analyze some of these numbers for you. In the second part, I'll speak to some economists on what all of these things mean for our country's survival and for your pocket. Stay with us. Welcome back. So tonight we're talking about trade, imports versus exports. Anytime the currency falls, the first thing we hear leaders say is we import too much, we export too little. So exports are important because when you sell what you produce, you generate foreign currency, whether it's dollars or pounds or euros or even RMB from China. Exports are very important. But no country produces everything it needs. You need to import as well. But the key thing is to add value to your raw materials so you can get more money for your exports and spend as little as possible on imports so your currency doesn't fall too much or fluctuate. So first, we need to acknowledge the Ghana Statistical Service for not just releasing a raw report, but also producing some very beautiful infographics, which I'm using for the show tonight. So let me start with the totals. So very important thing to look out for. There's something we call your total export versus your total imports. That's your basic definition of a trade deficit or a surplus. If your exports are more than your imports, you have a surplus. If your imports are more than your exports, you have a deficit. From what we have, we exported 186 billion cedis worth of products and imported 180. So that's almost a 5 million surplus. So 5 billion surplus. So there you have it. 2023 was actually a year of a trade surplus, which is great. In fact, the service tells us that had it not been for the terrible increase in commodity prices in 2022, even 2022 would have been a year of a surplus. So that's good, right? We had moved from a deficit of nearly 5 billion in 2022 to a surplus of over 5 billion in 2023. This is fantastic. This is great. The other thing which is important is point number 3. So there are about 220 or so countries in the world, right? Ghana imports from 214 countries. So we consume things from everywhere. We only export to 159 countries. So that already should tell you that we are consuming more than we are producing in terms of variety of products, not in terms of amount we spend. Because we are importing from over 200 countries, but we are exporting to less than 160 countries. So these are very important highlights. So 3 pieces of information. In 2023, our exports 186 billion, imports 180. Together, our trade to GDP is about 43%. So when you put these two figures together, 366 billion cedis out of our GDP, a bit below 50%. But this is a very important issue. There's a big question around why you have a big surplus, but your currency is still falling. Usually when you have a surplus, it means that you spend more, you get more from outside than you spend importing. This will be answered in a different discussion. Now let's look at the key products. This is another important issue, the key products. So what are we importing? What are we exporting? Now, gold is our main export, and this gold is unprocessed. It's basically raw. It's a raw material, right? So almost close to half of our export is gold, 45%. I'll show you a different stat that makes the point more clearly. Our second most important export is mineral fuel and oil. So this is crude oil, right? So we produce oil in the Jubilee fields, the 10 fields, and then the Sankofa fields. About 1/4 of our export is crude. So we don't add any value. We don't refine. TOR is not working. And then our third major export is cocoa beans and products, a little above 11%. So cocoa, gold, and oil are our 3 main exports. Now, what about our main imports? So when you see the arrow pointing out, it's an export. When the arrow points, it's an import. Beautiful work by Statistical Service. Now, the top product we import are finished or refined oil. So you produce crude oil and you export it, and then you go to other countries who have added value to the oil and import. So whether it's diesel or super, or even aviation kerosene for your aircraft, all the value is added abroad. That's one of the problems with our economy. So the top import product is mineral fuels and oil, right? This is very important to note, right? So you export gold, you export raw petroleum products, you export cocoa. Your major import is refined fuel. I will give you the top 10 products shortly. But let's look at which countries are involved in this conversation. Which countries are involved in this? So, which are our most important export destinations? Look at it. 80% of our gold goes to 3 countries: Switzerland, South Africa, and India. All right. Now, South Africa is an interesting one because South Africa is actually a producer of gold. So, are they buying our gold to resell it or to refine? That's a question that our analysts will answer later on during the show. Switzerland buys a lot of our gold. They also buy a lot of our cocoa, by the way. It's one of the world's wealthiest countries. Very expensive place as well. Switzerland is built on value addition and, of course, a financial sector. It's a country where a lot of people used to hide their stolen wealth. We're not sure if they still do that these days. We also export our crude oil to China. So they process it. So they have refineries there in China who add value to our crude oil. Later on, you notice we import finished product from China as well. So we are a very basic economy. We export things raw. We import finished products. Our 2 main trade partners are Europe and Asia, right? So Switzerland is not the only country. So Netherlands, the UK, Germany, a lot of these countries in Europe, they take a chunk of our trade, both exports and imports. So our main trading partners are not our neighbors. If you look at the value we export and import to Europe and Asia, it's much, much more than what we do with our African partners. So that's another important statistic to note. So Switzerland, South Africa, India, 4 out of every 5 gold is in those countries. China for our oil. Now let's talk about how we trade. What method are we using? Is it by air, by sea, or by land? Now that's an interesting one because in terms of our exports, about 46% of what we export goes by sea, 46.1%. 46.3% of our exports is by air. So that's mainly gold. So most of the gold going to Switzerland, South Africa, and India is going on aeroplanes. So possibly cargo planes. And this is very important. Because we don't trade a lot with our African partners, less than 10% of our transport, our exports are by road, right? So this, again, is a proxy. We are buying things from abroad, across the sea, or across the air. Very few by road. In terms of imports as well, now this is very interesting. Whereas when it comes to exports, it's evenly split between air and sea. When it comes to imports, it's predominantly by sea. 90% of our imports come by sea. Almost everything in this studio is imported. The cameras, the TV screens, the laptop, the mouse, the phones, even the pen. I'm sure even my glasses. The only thing that's made here is what I'm wearing. And I'm not even sure if the material was produced here, but it was designed by people here, and the shoe. The watch was also a Ghanaian watch, right? So this is, what's the name of the guy? Caveman. So Caveman. But everything else is imported. So that tells you 90% of our imports is coming on ships. So if you close the Tamar port, you've closed Ghana, right? Only 4.7% of our imports are by air because they are light things that you can transport by air, mainly gold, possibly from neighboring countries for re-export. 6% again, all right? Now let's talk about African neighbors. So this is because African countries don't seem to be very important when it comes to our trade. But I like this number because we export about 38 billion to other African countries, and we import 17.9 billion from Africa. So when it comes to our continent, we have a trade surplus. So that's good. It means Ghana, compared to her neighbors and other African countries, we export more than we import. That's good. But again, inter-Africa trade was dominated by South Africa, mainly for gold, and then a few other countries like Côte d'Ivoire, which is our main neighbor, Burkina Faso, and Togo. There's a very interesting statistic on Burkina Faso I'll show you. We are importing vegetables from Burkina Faso. Very serious indeed. So that's the... And let's talk about food, finally. Let's talk about food before I get into specific details. So now, this is actually a mistake. We import... our import of food reduced. So this is actually imports, and this is actually export. So our import of food from 2022 to 2023 reduced from 15.5 to 14.8. So that's import of food. While our export of food also reduced. So 2023 was a slower year than 2022 when it comes to imports and exports. All right. Now, the main food we export is cocoa products. So we do cocoa butter and then some cocoa products like chocolates. That's our main food export. We import grains, cereals, and meat. So this includes flour to produce bread, rice, and wheat, and then meat. All right. Now, talking about South Africa and Egypt being our main import destinations or import origins, we also do import some food from Burkina Faso, and this is something we'll talk about. Burkina Faso is the leading trade partner, and we import a lot of shea nuts. I don't know why, and vegetables and fruits from Burkina Faso. People say Burkina Faso's weather is not that great, so why are we importing tomatoes, for example, from Burkina Faso? We'll discuss that with our experts in the second part of the program. But besides South Africa and Egypt for imports of cement clinkers, Ghana's neighboring countries are the main trading partners within Africa: Burkina Faso, Togo, and Côte d'Ivoire. All right? And of course, Burkina Faso is the leading trade partner among Ghana's neighboring countries, especially imports shea nuts from Burkina Faso and exports iron and steel to Burkina Faso. So some of our iron and steel companies are doing well. Fabri Metal, what do you call it? Something 5, B5 Plus, I think the name is, doing very well. So we import grain cereals. Now let's look at our top 10 export products. Then I'll show you our top 10 import products. Then I'll show you our top 10 or top export destinations and top import origins. But yes, this may not be too clear, but let's look at our top 10 import commodities. 2023, as I said, we export crude oil and import finished products. So diesel is the most important product. We spent 27 billion Ghana cedis last year importing diesel. That's about 15% of all our imports. Why is diesel important? It runs cars, it runs different equipment. So tractors, articulated trucks, even excavators, they run on diesel. So diesel is not just transport. Diesel is also construction. Diesel is mining. So diesel is the single most important thing we import. We imported 20 billion cedis worth of diesel in 2022. It jumped to 27 billion. Second most important import is petrol, what is called super. Light oil, motor spirit. They call it premium motor spirit, right? 22 billion cedis. That's 12% of our imports is petrol. Then cement clinker. Cement clinker is one of the key raw materials for making cement. There's clinker and there's gypsum. 3 billion cedis worth of clinker is imported. All right? And then medium oils, kerosene, jet fuel. So in our top 5 imports, 3 are all petroleum or fuel. Diesel number 1, petrol number 2, kerosene, aviation, turbine kero, ATK, aviation turbine kero. It's number 4 on the list. So in our top 5, diesel, petrol, kerosene. If TOR were working, some of these things we produced here, if CENTUO starts working, hopefully, it will add more value. So transportation, construction, fuel. Food comes in as number 5. That's cereal grains. All right? So you're talking wheat and those type of things. 2.7 billion. That includes rice. And all the cereals. Actually, no, that doesn't include rice. Rice is at the bottom. Cereal grains, worked but not rolled or flaked, or other cereals, 2.7 billion. Used vehicles, very interesting. In 2022, vehicles was the number 4 most imported food item into Ghana. But in 2023, it drops to number 6. Why? Some will say the port charges are high. Now, to import a car is expensive. So in 2022, used vehicles was number 4. Used vehicles was number 4. But in 2023, it's come down to number 6. Okay. Now, herbicides, anti-sprout products, and plant regulators, chemicals, 2.2 billion. Self-propelled bulldozers. This includes excavators and things we use in mining, 2.2 billion. This is a country that for a period even said they were banning certain kinds of mining. Yet, don't forget, gold is our number 1 export. So a lot of these bulldozers are used in the mining field. Rice is number 9 of our most important imports. Rice, semi-milled or wholly milled, 2 billion Ghana cedis. And then shea nuts, 2 billion cedis. So your top 10, diesel, petrol, cement products, kerosene, cereals, cars, chemicals, bulldozers, rice, shea nuts. Those are your top 10. Okay. Now, let's go to our top 10 most important exports. So this is what we are importing. Let's go into what are we exporting? Mostly raw things. Top 10 exports. Gold bullion, 84 billion cedis. That's about half of all our exports. Raw gold, no value added. Petroleum oil, you see the irony here. You're producing petrol, but you're not doing anything to it. So 43 billion cedis worth of petroleum crude exported to China and other places so that they will go and refine it and sell it back to us more expensive. You see how the thing works. Now look at the value. So this is 43 billion worth of petroleum products. But not all of this belongs to us. Some of this belongs to the Jubilee partners. So not all this money comes to Ghana. So they are recording what goes out of the country. All right. Now, I wanted you to compare the 43 billion, which is the value of what we export, to the value of what we... So go back to the import figure. Let me just check something. The top 10 import commodities, if you can just check it. So this is 27 plus 22. That's 49. Plus 2. That's 51. So you are spending 51 billion cedis importing petrol. Now go to the export. Go to the export. 43. So you see, you are spending more importing than you are getting from what you produce. And not all of this even belongs to you. So you see the problem. All the petroleum that you are exporting is 43 billion. And when the finished product is put together, it's 51 billion. And this is not all for you. So you see the logic now. Cocoa beans, raw, 12 billion export. So raw gold, raw petrol, raw cocoa. Cocoa paste is the first level of value addition. Cocoa paste, not defatted. So this is basic cocoa value added. Manganese ore, this is also 3 billion. No value addition. Cashew, in shell, they haven't even deshelled it, 2.4 billion. Natural cocoa butter, this is the first value addition. So from cocoa beans, cocoa paste, cocoa butter, 2 billion. Not bad. We should do better here. So this is GEPA and the work they do. Tuna, 1.5 billion. We have big vessels. Some don't belong to us, but they produce tuna and export. Iron, steel, and bar, 1.2. Not further than forged. So this is basic steel products, not finished product like a knife or cutlery. Basic iron stuff. Shea, 1 billion. And then all other products, 30 billion. So you see the challenge we have. Almost everything here, there's no value addition, except probably number 7. Almost everything you import, there's value addition. So that's your second problem. Now let's look at the countries that are top 5 global export destinations. What can we learn from that? Top 5 export. Okay, let's look at Africa. Good one. Top 5 countries in Africa for export. So which countries are buying our stuff? South Africa, most of it is gold. Almost 90% of what they buy from us is raw gold, so we are not adding any value. The black is mineral fuels and oil. So that's some of our crude goes to South Africa. So almost everything we send to Africa is raw. Okay. Second most important person who buys our thing, and this is 2022. 2023 is the same. 84% gold, 21% mineral and fuel oil. Burkina Faso is our next most important destination, about 5%. What are they buying from us? Chemical products, green. And then iron and steel from these steel companies, all right, to build their houses. Plastics, mostly probably something we import and then sell to them. And then other products. So Burkina Faso, this is in billions, about 5 billion. Côte d'Ivoire, less than 3 billion cedis we export to them. Togo, 2.4 billion. Mali, 1.8 billion. So you see, this is our top 5 African exports. South Africa is around 22 billion cedis. The rest are all below 5 billion cedis. These are our top export destinations. South Africa, which is down there, our 3 neighbors, and Mali. We don't even have Nigeria. Nigeria is such a big market. Think about that. Nigeria has 200 million people. They come here every time. They are speaking our English. They are not among our top 5 export destinations. There's something wrong here. Nigeria? Come on. Nigerians are everywhere. They have a big market. We don't export anything to Nigeria. Yet we say we have AFTA. Top 5 African countries for imports. South Africa, but look at the diversification. Now, there's something you need to look at when it comes to trade. The more things you have in the chart, the more diversified is your trade. So go back to the Africa for export, and I'll show you something. Go back to Africa for export. This one for Africa for export. You see, it's only 1, 2. It's not diversified. It's only 1, 2. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4. So our exports are not diversified. This is basic economics. The more things you produce, the more you are shielded. So if they say they won't take gold again from you, you are finished. You see, so if you sell only one thing, people don't buy that thing, you don't do anything. So our exports are not diversified. Now, let's come to what we import from South Africa. Come to the import for Africa. You see, this is diversification. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 products. The blue is what? Machinery and electrical equipment from South Africa. The green is chemical products. The red is vehicles. So we are importing cars from South Africa, right? The ash is iron and steel. We are importing from South Africa. The orange is plastics from South Africa. Vegetable products, South Africa. Other products. So South Africa is importing, or we are importing 3.4 billion worth of diversified products. This is diversification. Second one is Egypt. The green is chemicals. Then plastics. 73% of our imports from Egypt is other products. So a wide variety of things. So this purple is diversification because there are so many things that they are too tiny to be separated. Now, this is an interesting number for me. Burkina Faso, so you see, West Africa, we are not diversified. Burkina Faso is our 3rd most important import source in Africa. It's just one color, 90%. And what is it? Vegetables. You see? So we are importing 90% of our import from Burkina Faso is just vegetables. Which begs the question. They are a Sahelian country. We have the 3rd largest man-made lake in the world. How on earth are we importing vegetables from Burkina Faso? I don't understand. You have Volta Lake, you have Esuchari, you have Afram Plains. Ghana is one of the most fertile lands. You've dammed the Volta at Akosombo, and you also dammed the Volta at Bon. You have irrigation, yet you import vegetables from Burkina Faso. Togo, 66% is mineral and fuels. So this probably is phosphate and some things we use in cement and other things. Côte d'Ivoire, diversified, right? So we import minerals, we import cocoa beans, some of it is smuggled. We import chemicals, and we import other products. Côte d'Ivoire, by 1.6 billion. But these are very troubling. So the South Africans are more diversified than we, the Ghanaians. 90% of our imports from Burkina Faso are vegetables. This doesn't make sense. Now, before you go to global, show me chicken, rice, and shea butter, because a lot of this is also shea nuts. A lot of this is shea nuts. So I don't know if you have the chicken, rice, and shea nut thing to just discuss it a bit. Chicken, rice, and shea nuts. If you have it, I'm very happy to see it. Live chicken, rice, and shea nuts. If you don't have it yet, let's look at the global import-export situation. Okay, yeah, there you go. These guys are great. Professor Anim, solid, statistical service. They design all of this. They realize that when they put the thing on paper, you don't read. So now they are doing it this way. Because you don't want to read. All of us, we just, So Professor Anim and his team, powerful guys. Ghana's chicken imports. Now, Ghana imports, so this is what they've done. 2021, 2023. Okay. They've done Ghana cedis and US dollars. Frozen and then live. So this is easy to understand, even if you haven't gone to a lot of school. So let's look at it this way. We imported $83 million worth of frozen chicken in 2021. Okay. It jumped to $216 million in 2022. Now, 80 times, almost times 3. So our frozen chicken eatment, it raised from 83, this is less than 100, to 150, 200, 216. Now, in dollar terms, it reduced to 171 in 2023. But in CD terms, and I'll explain why, currency depreciation. In CD terms, $484 million worth of chicken, 2021. It went to $1.7 billion worth of chicken, 2022. And it went to almost cedis, forgive me, cedis. 400 million cedis, 1.7 billion cedis, 1.9 billion cedis of frozen chicken. So almost 2 billion cedis worth of frozen chicken in 2023. We are importing from Netherlands, from USA, from Brazil, frozen chicken. Some of it is 10 years old. We are eating it happily. Eating things into our system. Now, this is what we should be importing if we want to grow our poultry industry, live chickens, and grow them here. In terms of Ghana cedis, it increased from 89 million cedis to 92 million cedis to 123 million cedis. In fact, in dollar terms, it didn't even increase. I have a special report on the poultry industry. I'll play that report when I come back because I think it tells the story nicely. All right, because that is, if we can grow our own live chicks, a lot of the money spent here can be saved. Because obviously, this is nicer than this. If you have the chain, you know, you see, would the JBD tuntu and nama the chain gas? We Ghana chicken the chain import. Simple matter. When we come back, I'll show you rice and I'll show you shea butter. And then I'll play a short report on chicken. Then I'll speak to 2 academics to explain this whole problem to us. So this is the point of view, special edition, import-export, which is better. Your guess as good as mine. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight on The Point of View, we are looking at Ghana's import-export conundrum. Ghana has run a trade surplus. It did that in 2023. 2022 was a deficit, but that was just because commodity prices increased that year. In real terms, it was also a surplus. There are key issues here being discussed. Our top 10 products we export are mostly raw. Our top 10 products we import are mostly finished products. We've also shown you the situation with chicken. We spent close to 2 billion cedis importing frozen chicken last year, and that's been increasing. We also spent quite a bit of money importing live chicks, ostensibly to grow. So those are the numbers. 1.9 billion cedis worth of frozen chicken in 2023, up from less than $500 million. In terms of live chicks, who then feed the poultry industry, 89 billion cedis to 123. Let's look at rice quickly, and then I'll speak to my guest. What is the rice situation telling us? We import so much rice. We don't produce. Look at that. 2021, 921 million cedis worth of rice imported. We only exported less than 1 million. We don't export any rice. We don't even produce enough rice to eat. So it's just no grain. This is like whatever. The next year, our rice imports reduce, which is not bad. 781, and it's come further down to 626. So there's a steady decline in rice imports. That tells you that the rice production is increasing. We need to do better. From 0.03 to 0.34 to 0.5. But this is not really an important issue of export. It's more about producing to consume. So the key numbers are the reductions here. So the rice we are importing is reducing. Although we are eating more, it tells you that local rice is doing well. It can do much better. From 900 million to 600. Show me share. I don't understand the share one. I don't understand the share issue because I don't know whether the Burkinabe are selling it to us for us to process. So these are the imports. This is the export. 2 billion worth of share from Burkina Faso and 100 million from Togo. So, and then of course, in terms of export, we export to India 0.03, so 1.2 billion to Belgium. So somebody needs to explain this to me. So we are importing share from Burkina Faso, and we are importing from Burkina Faso, we are exporting to Belgium. Right? What's happening? Is it that they pass it through our country to send to Belgium, or we add value to it to send to Belgium. I don't know. Let me talk to my guest. I have Professor Charles Acker. He is with the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, ISE. Prof, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Bernard.
It's good to have you. And I also have Dr. Frank Edu. He is with the Africa Center for Economic Transformation Asset. Doc, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Bernard.
So let me start with Prof. Charles. What's the most important thing you saw in this data set? Statistical Service has released information around our imports and exports. So we have a trade surplus, but it looks like the devil is in the detail. What's the most important observation you made looking at those numbers?
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. So I think, it's about what you trade is what matters in terms of trade. Whether you are trading primary produce, raw materials, or you are trading finished processed goods is what gives you an advantage in the trading market. And I think from what you showed us, or what Statistical Service has produced, we have known this for a long time. I think what the Statistical Service is doing is to bring this to the attention of policymakers and to make it more graphic so that you can see our poverty in our trade situation. So since Gadgetberg's time, we are a country that is still trading or importing manufactured or finished products. Those are more expensive. And then we are a country that still exports primarily agricultural, raw material, natural resource materials that are almost in their raw state. And even though we seem to be recording some trade balance, positive balance or surplus, it's not significant, and is not sustainable. So it's still subject to changes in demand and supply and changes in the performance of our currency. Honestly, it's because of the depreciation or pseudo devaluation of our currency that is making export more competitive, which is something that we need to discuss, whether our exchange rate was overvalued. Maybe we are now get to the true level of the value of the city in terms of our trading partners.
Let me take Dr. Edu's comments before I come back. Doc, thanks for joining us. What is your observation going through those numbers?
Well, Bernard, thank you again. So the data from the Ghana Statistical Service, highlights some sort of a notable shift from a trade deficit in 2022 to a surplus in 2023. Of course, with the surplus amounting to total trade amounting to about 366 billion. Now, what are the possible factors behind the shift from a trade deficit in 2022 to a surplus in 2023? Is it because of increased gold export? We are told that export rose by about 7.8%. Is it because we have a more diversified export portfolio, including significant contribution from cocoa and mineral fuels? Strategic trade relationships, especially if you look at the trade flow, you can see that China is now, then Eastern European countries are a big player in the export data that we kind of witnessed. So possibly, these are issues that we would like to look at on the interim. Thank you.
All right, let me stay with you. How concerned are you about the food issues? So if you look at, for example, I had a data set on the top 5 African import origins. Burkina Faso is number 3. And 90% of what we import from Burkina Faso is vegetables, right? Chicken imports as well, close to 2 billion cedis on frozen chicken, and not that much on live chicken. Then you have shea importing 2 billion worth of shea nuts, I guess, or shea products from Burkina Faso again. What's your comment on that?
Thank you, Bernard. Well, I think for shea and then vegetables, probably for shea, I think Burkina is actually trying to transit their goods through our port. But we should be more worried about chicken and then vegetables. Some few days ago, I think I saw on social media how truckloads of onions are trickling into our various markets in Kumasi, the Ashanti region, and then some part of the Bono regions. The Bono region, they are noted for producing some of these vegetables. So when it happens like that, we should be worried about the food security implications of such imports. So I think it's something for policymakers to look at, especially with the vegetable production. But for shea, I'm quite sure they are transiting their goods through our port.
Professor Aka, what are your thoughts around food imports? Rice, chicken, vegetables, and the numbers?
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. When it comes to food imports, I think that is an area that we need to have a national conversation. The truth of the matter is that, as you rightly said, we have one of the most fertile lands blessed by God in all of Africa. If you see our attitude towards agriculture, it's nothing to write home about. We just play lip service, whether it's planting for food and jobs, phase 1 or phase 2. I think it's probably former President Kutu Achampong that tried to do something serious with agriculture. So a country that imports food, basic things like tomatoes, onions, chicken, vegetables, so much vegetables from our Sahel neighbors, just shows that the people we put in charge of agriculture policy have failed massively. And in the current insecure global world in which we are, if you don't achieve food sovereignty or food security and energy sovereignty, you will be in big trouble. It's a security issue, it's a national security issue, that we don't have a handle, we don't have control to produce what we eat. It's an indictment on the leadership of the country. When we have so much water resources, in fact, we have so much fertile land, the season is good for most part of the southern part. In Afram Plains, as you said, I visited Afram Plains. I've interacted with the farmers in Afram Plains. In fact, this current planting season, they are at the mercy of the weather. They are praying basically for rain. Some of them planted maize, and then for 2-3 weeks it was not raining. They lost everything. I know a farmer that planted 200 acres of maize. In fact, actually, it's a religious organization. They planted about 200 acres of maize. All those maize seedlings were imported. We don't have research, investment in research and development like WACI and Co, CSR, that can produce strong, resilient seeds here. Government is not investing in the agriculture colleges, agriculture department in Care University, Legon, Cape Coast. So we import, they have different names that they call them. And when you import them, they are very expensive. For you to plant a 1 acre or even 10 acres, you need to invest about close to 10,000 Ghana cedi just to buy the maize seeds. And then you need all the fertilizers, you need all the labor. They invested that, and the rains failed to come, and they lost everything. And that is the situation that you have across all the country. There's no proper investment in agriculture. Irrigation is not there. Despite the fact that you have the Afram Plains, the Water River lying down there, they just put a pontoon on it, ferry, to carry the people across. But there's no support for the people. You talk to the people, they don't receive any subsidy because IMF or some people have told us that phase out subsidy, government. So subsidy is almost gone. These farmers have to borrow. If you talk to the rural farmers in my village, they borrow from the rural bank at 30 to 35% to be able to plant cocoa or plant any vegetables. You cannot be competing with European people that get subsidy under their Common Agricultural Policy Forum, and they are targeting your market. So tomatoes is the same. I've gone to places where they plant tomatoes. Go to the Volta region. People are planting tomatoes. They go to Ada, they are planting watermelon and all of those kinds of things. There's almost basically no support. So food sovereignty is a serious situation. That's why inflation reached 54% sometime last year, and it was mainly driven by food inflation. And that makes it very, very difficult. If we do another, and I think the GLSS is doing GLSS 8, and we are going to look at the poverty situation, I will be surprised if poverty and extreme poverty has not increased in Ghana, because to be honest with you, people cannot afford food anymore. Things that you used to buy for 2 cedi, 3 cedi. No, yesterday I tried to buy tomatoes in a Medina market, and the tomatoes, the paint bucket that I used to sell for about 70 cedis, they quoted for 200 Ghana cedis in Medina market. So I don't see how we will survive. The basic thing for poor people to live on is food, and yet we are not producing the food, and then we now import the food with the scarce, foreign currency that we have. I think that is a big failure.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, mainly because there's no proper policy, there's no proper investment, there's no strategic policy towards agriculture. And if agriculture fails, industry will fail, because industry is actually supposed to be the secondary sector based on agriculture. If agriculture produce food and produce the raw materials, then manufacturing can process them. You cannot have any proper manufacturing sector that is totally dependent on import of raw materials. That's why industry is also struggling, because they now have to import almost all their input, including the perishable ones. So I think we need to focus on agriculture seriously.
Thank you, Prof. Discussion. We will come back and wrap this up. I'm still with Professor Charles Aka and Dr. Frank Edu. We're looking at Ghana's import-export conundrum through the lens of the recent or the latest trade statistics published by the GSS. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight on The Point of View, it's almost 3 parts. We started off by showing you some of the latest trade statistics. Ghana has a trade surplus, but that's not the real story. The issue is in the lack of diversification of our exports and the very many things we import from many countries. For example, we import from 214 countries, we export to 154 countries. Now, Doris Longta, our Ashanti regional correspondent, has been looking at the challenges facing poultry producers in the Ashanti region. She came through with this report, which underscores some of the issues my guests have been talking about.
The Ghanaian market has over the years been flooded with imported products. Worse still is the rate at which food items, especially frozen chicken, are flown into the country. While consumers root for imported frozen chicken because of its affordable prices, poultry farmers regret low sales and their inability to meet growing demands because of the cost of production. Poultry specialist at the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Ricky Abuajipoku, bemoaned that Ghana loses over $400 million every year on the importation of chicken, emphasizing the need for an intervention to retain such an amount in the country to boost the economy.
If you look at the import levels that we bring into the country spends over $400 million importing frozen chicken alone. Not to talk about the other products the project is also taking care of, the rice, the soya and other things. So what it means is that if we're able to do this consistently and we are able to sustain it as time goes on, this money will be kept in the country. It is going to support our economy. Our GDP will be more stable, and then the dollar currency, the exchange rate will also be stable.
Operations Manager of the Food System Resilience Program, FSRP, under the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Philip Daniel Laye, expressed concerns about food insecurity and the effect of climate change on the food system in the country. He stressed that the Food System Resilience Project, FSRP, is determined to bring such concerns under control.
The poultry, our emphasis is on broiler production. You know, we have 2 types of poultry in the industry. The layers, which is the eggs, the table eggs we see on the roadside and so on, as well as the broiler, which is what is bred for meat. We see that there is more challenge when it comes to the broiler aspect. So that is what the project has selected.
The Food System Resilience Project, FSRP, under the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, with funding of $150 million from the World Bank, is providing interest-free inputs in the form of 160,000 day-old chicks, 180,000 kilograms of feed, and vaccines in the first round of allocations each to 22 commercial anchor farmers across the country. In the Ashanti region, the commercial anchor farmers include Boris B, Dako, Akate, Holland Akoko, Asamoah and Yamwa farms. These farmers will work collaboratively with other smallholder farmers in the region. Out of the 6 farms, 3 have taken delivery of about 130,000 day-old chicks, which constitutes their first consignment of day-old chicks under the scheme. They are Rockland, Dako Farms, and Boris B Farms. The general manager of Rockland Farms, Dominic Nzole, expressed excitement that the project will increase youth employment.
The processing plant will take a lot more labor. The Agua scheme is expanding to take a lot more labor. And on our own farm, we are going to also increase labor. So labor is going to increase tremendously to also affect the lot of the youth that we have in the system.
Farmers under the project will also receive training in best modern practices and climate-smart technologies within the poultry industry. They will further be able to access matching grants of up to $400,000 to procure equipment to support post-production processing and cold storage. The scheme targets the production of approximately 2 million broiler birds on a yearly basis for a period of 5 years to match up with the growing demand for frozen chicken.
So that was Doris's report. I just want you to put back the chicken data here, and then I would ask a couple of questions around chicken and tomatoes. So what Doris is saying is, what is this? So we import live chickens or live chicks, and then we grow. So basically, your ability to reduce this depends on what you do with these guys. And then, of course, you need maize and feed, soya bean and that kind of thing to feed the chickens to get to a point where you can produce enough chicken to compete with this, right? That's what's not happening. Now, I also saw a statistic, which I'm yet to confirm, but listening to Professor Aka, I tend to believe. A box of tomatoes surged by over 360% in less than 6 months. January 2024, it was selling for 1,500 cedis. By June, it's now 6,000 to 7,000 cedis. Now, Dr. Edu, let's talk about food, because it seems as if of all the things that we import, food is the one that makes least sense, because you need fuel to run your car. Setting up an oil refinery may take you many more years, but it looks like food should be the easiest. What's the missing link? Is it that people don't like local food? Look at the chicken situation, right? Almost 2 billion on frozen chicken. What's your comment around what we can do about food? Because if I put all the food numbers together, that will save us a lot of foreign exchange. Then we can import things we can't do. What are your thoughts on the food discussion?
Well, Bernard, the foundational issue is that agric is a risky venture in Ghana here. So we need to have a strategic conversation on de-risking agriculture. What are some of the things that we need to do to make agriculture very competitive? Few months ago, I think I saw the Ministry of Finance has started an agric enclave project in around the Efienya area. I think it was borrowed from a Nigerian concept where they construct some sort of an enclave, bring in people, train people, make land available, accessible, bring in the machinery. I mean, some of these things are very laudable, but I think we need to scale it up to other regions, especially as we talk about vegetables, we talk about grains, because you cannot have a vibrant poultry industry without having feed to feed this poultry. If you look at our exchange rate issues, how much do you need to import even a bag of poultry feed? That's going to be high. If we have maize in Ghana, I'm sure we can produce some local poultry feed at a very cheap rate, to feed the poultry, and then kind of tap into this, poultry business probably well. So I think we have a big problem right from the production of day-old chicks to having matured chicken on the market. So we need to be very strategic and then think about it right from, the inception to the end.
Please show me the Africa data. I want to ask Professor Aka a question about that. Prof, Africa is an interesting situation. Ghana imports about 18 billion cedis from African countries and exports about 38 billion. So for the African continent, we seem to have a trade surplus. But most of our trade partners, Egypt and South Africa, we export gold to those countries and then we import finished products. When I looked in the data, Nigeria was not really doing well. Look at this. So for example, 2023, South Africa is our major import neighbor, Egypt, Burkina Faso, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire. All right. Now, if you come to export, give me the export figure for Africa. Export for Africa. Nigeria is also not there. All right. In our top 5, Nigeria is not within the export. Can you change this to export, please? Our top 5 export destinations: South Africa, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Mali. And when you look at the figures, these are very low figures. I mean, we are talking about after. Is this not a problem that Nigeria is such a big market? We have such a good relationship with the country, and yet we are not exporting anything to Nigeria. It's South Africa, mostly gold, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Mali, all below 5 billion. What are we missing with AFTA and Nigeria? Why are they not here?
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. I mean, one is the products that we are exporting. So the products we are exporting are not really in high demand in Africa. If you look at our top export, you're talking about gold, you're talking about oil, you're talking about manganese, bauxite, timber. They don't go to Nigeria. Nigeria doesn't process these things. So Europe is our biggest market. Now we are looking at China, we are looking at India and other places. So for us to be able to take advantage of AFTA and therefore take advantage of the African market, it means that we need to add value. We need to look at where is our competitive advantage and which products are highly demanded. The ones that Nigerians are importing from Europe, that's the one that we can compete, because it should be easier for us to get those things exported from Ghana to Nigeria than for them to bring it from Belgium or Netherlands. Once we are not adding value, then they produce almost the same thing we produce. They have yam, we have yam, they have onions, they have cassava, they have almost everything. So then that market will not work. That's one. The second thing has to do with infrastructure. It's more difficult to export or to travel to Nigeria than to go to Europe or to go. So if we don't fix the infrastructure problem, first class transport, rail, there's still challenge with even visa or travel documents. If you travel by road to Nigeria, you see the number of barriers. A distance that should take you about 3, 4, 5 hours will take you almost a whole day, and you have about 5 checkpoints at every border: Togo border, Burkina border, Benin border, Nigeria border, and you go through several harassment. So if you're a business person that's dealing with Nigerian partners, it's more difficult than for you to go to China or to go to Europe. So we need to fix those as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Charles Aka from the ISER, Institute of Statistical Social Economic Research. Thank you, Dr. Frank Edu from the ACET, Africa Center for Economic Transformation. Thank you for your insights. A big thanks to the Statistical Service for this wonderful information they've shared with us. Professor Enim and your team, great job. Thank you for your support.
Can I add one last comment?
Okay, I was thanking you. You can add it in 10 seconds.
Okay, all right. So, Bernard, if you look at the data, you realize that we are now trading more with China, India, South Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions that popped up in my head is, are we ready to have the BRICS conversation? It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to join BRICS, but maybe have a strategy for engaging with the BRICS countries. Because, I mean, Ghana, we've said that we are non-aligned. But so far as our trade data goes, it means that it should mean something to policymakers, that perhaps there are certain things that needs to be put in place to engage these countries as a whole.
All right.
So maybe you can throw it out there.
Thank you.
Thank
you for ending on the BRICS note. Thanks for watching tonight's edition, which has come to you on Channel 1 TV. We'll see you next time. Have a good night. Bye-bye.